The Man Next to You. Original stories of ordinary people in extraordinary hours. The ones history forgets to name. Season 1, The 100 Hours. Episode 5, The Count. Corporal Aaron Beck had stopped being able to count somewhere around 4,000, and the desert kept handing him more. They came over the dunes the way water finds the low ground. Not in a charge, never in a charge, but in a slow, steady seep, in twos and tens, and then in long, ragged columns. Hands up or hands behind their heads, or hands clutching the paper leaflets that had fallen from the sky for weeks, promising them exactly this: that if they came like this, walking, empty, they would be fed and they would not be killed. They came out of the trenches and the bunkers and the abandoned vehicles, and they came toward the first Americans they could find. And lately, the first Americans they could find were Beck and his handful of MPs, standing in the open desert with a roll of concertina and a clipboard and an assignment that had outgrown them by a factor of 1,000. Cluster coming in, Beck. North side, looks like, I don't know, man, a lot. They're all a lot, Beck said. He'd been an MP for 3 years, and he had imagined, in the way you imagine things before they happen, that the prisoner mission would be the easy one, the safe one, the one you were almost embarrassed to have drawn. Stand around or shame. Guard some guys, nobody shooting at you. He'd been half ashamed of it back in the rear. He was not ashamed of it now. Now he understood that he had drawn the strangest duty in the whole war, to be the first human face of mercy that a defeated and terrified army saw, and to do it with nowhere near enough water, food, shade, or hands, hour after hour, while the seep never stopped. It was not dangerous the way the tankers' war was dangerous. It was its own thing. It was a flood, and he was a man with a bucket, and the flood was made of people. They were not what the briefings had built in his head, and that was the part that had rearranged him in 3 days the way it rearranges everyone who does this duty. The briefings had built an enemy, a unit, a force, a threat with a flag. And here instead, walking toward him out of the dunes with their hands up, were men, just men. Old men and boys, mostly. The briefings hadn't mentioned how old and how young. Men who hadn't been fed by their own army in weeks. Men with their boots held together by wire, with photographs in their breast pockets they took out and showed him with shaking hands. Wives, children, an old woman on a doorstep, as if to say, see, I am a person, I belong to people, do not erase me. Men who wept when he handed them a bottle of water, openly, without shame, because they had been so sure for so long that the Americans would simply kill them. And the water meant it was true after all. The leaflets had been true. They were going to live. Beck had handed out a lot of water in 3 days. He had watched a lot of grown men cry over it. He did not think he would ever again be able to take a drink of water without some ghost of it. You speak English? He asked the cluster, the way he always asked, mostly hopeless. Anybody? English? And this time from the middle of the column, an older man raised his hand, not high, the careful half-raise of a man who has learned this week exactly how to move so as not to be misunderstood, and said, in slow, careful book English, the English of someone who had learned it from love rather than necessity, I speak a little. I was, before, a teacher of English in a school. A teacher? Beck almost laughed, not unkindly, just at the size of it, at the way the war kept doing this, kept reaching into the enemy column and pulling out a person. Okay, teacher, I need your help. Can you tell them water's coming, food's coming, trucks are coming to take them somewhere safe, and nobody is going to hurt them if they stay calm and stay together? Can you tell them that? The teacher told them. His voice went out over the column in the other language, and Beck watched it land, watched the shoulders come down, watched the terror drain out of 100 faces at once and leave behind it something almost worse. The slack, hollowed exhaustion of men who had been braced to die for so long that being told they'd live was a weight of its own. They thank you, the teacher said. They say, God bless you. The young ones especially. They are very afraid. They are very young. Yeah, Beck said. I noticed. It was the teacher who pointed out the boy. That one, Jetty said quietly, while they worked the column down onto the ground in rows to wait for the trucks. He has not let go of his paper. 2 days, I think, he will not put it down. Beck looked. Near the end of the column, sitting where he had been told to sit, was a boy who could not have been more than 16, and in both hands held against his chest the way a smaller child holds a toy, was one of the surrender leaflets, filthy now, soft with handling, falling apart at the creases. He held it like it was the only thing keeping him alive. In a sense, Beck supposed it had been. He came in 2 days ago with others, the teacher said, from the first fighting. He says a great line of your vehicles came in the dark, more than he could count. And he was so afraid, and he held up the paper. And one of your vehicles passed very close, and a man in the top of it, a soldier, looked at him and did not shoot, and pointed that way to the rear, to safety. And the boy walked that way, and here he is. The teacher's careful English softened. He has decided the paper is, how do you say, a holy thing, the thing that saved him. He will not put it down because he believes if he puts it down, the magic ends and the war comes back for him. Beck looked at the boy holding his ragged scrap of mercy, and he thought about the soldier in the top of the vehicle, some tanker, some track commander, some exhausted American sergeant in the worst night of his life who had taken half a second in the middle of a battle to not shoot a terrified child and to point him toward living instead. Beck would never know the man's name. The boy would never know it. But the boy had built a religion out of that half second and was holding the evidence of it against his chest in the desert. And Beck found he had to look away for a moment and study the horizon very hard. Tell him, Beck said when he could, tell him he can keep the paper. Tell him the magic doesn't end. Tell him he's safe now, that the man who pointed him this way, he passed him to me, and I'm going to pass him to the next guy, and that's how it works. That's the whole chain. All the way home. Tell him he never has to be that scared again. The teacher told him, and the boy looked up at Beck with enormous dark eyes and did not let go of the paper, but he nodded, a small grave nod. One human being accepting a promise from another across a gulf of language and uniform, and everything that was supposed to make them enemies. And Beck nodded back, and that was a treaty, that little exchange, more real than anything that would get signed by anybody. The trucks finally came in the afternoon, raising their long banners of dust, and the slow work began of loading the column aboard for the cages in the rear where there was water and shade and a count that somebody with more clipboards than Beck would eventually fail to finish too. He got them up, got them moving, the teacher helping, translating, gentling the old and the young, the two of them, the imp and the schoolteacher, working side by side now like the strangest pair of colleagues the war ever made. When the last truck was nearly full, the teacher turned to him, and there was a question in his face he'd plainly been carrying for 3 days. "May I ask," he said, "why? Why the water? Why the gentleness? We were told you would not be gentle. We were told many things." A pause. "Why do you do this?" Beck thought about it. He was 23 years old and bone-tired, and he had handed out water until grown men wept, and he had watched a 16-year-old build a faith out of a scrap of paper, and he gave the only answer he had, which happened to be true. "Because the shooting's going to stop," he said, "maybe this week, and when it stops, you're not the enemy anymore. You're just people who had a really bad week. And I figure the kind of guy I am after the war is decided by the kind of guy I am during it." He shrugged, embarrassed by the size of what he'd said. "Also, you're thirsty, and I got water. It's not that deep, teacher. It's just water." The teacher looked at him for a long moment. "It is that deep," he said. "I will teach this. If I go home, when I go home, I will teach this to my students for all my life. The American who gave us water. I will make it that deep." He climbed up onto the truck and turned back once. "Thank you, Corporal. For my country's sons, thank you." The trucks pulled out. The boy with the leaflet was on one of them. his paper still against his chest. And as the truck turned, Beck saw him press the ragged scrap flat to the window and look back. And Beck raised his hand and held it up until the dust took them. And then he turned around, and over the northern dunes, in the failing gold light, the next column was already coming. Twos and tens, hands up, pale shirts and falling apart boots and photographs in breast pockets. The seep that never stopped. More than he could count, again, always more than he could count. Beck picked up his clipboard, which had long ago lost all meaning, and his water, which had not, and he walked out to meet them. "You speak English?" he called into the oldest and most necessary failure of arithmetic there is, the count no soldier on this duty ever finished, and the count that, for everyone it touched, mattered more than any other in the war. "Anybody? English? It's okay, water's coming. You're safe. Come on in." You've been listening to The Man Next to You. These people are fictional. What they carried was not. If this story stayed with you, leave it where someone else might find it, and come back next week for the next one. Until then, take care of the man next to you.